course, we're speaking of the terrorist attack on New York City and the Pentagon and the crash plane in Pennsylvania. But we're specifically going to address the root causes and the after effects. So I want to go beyond just, someone attacked us, but to understand where the roots of that tree of evil and terrorism grows. We have to go back to the Cold War, actually, to understand the roots of 9/11. And remember, the mastermind, basic information, the mastermind of 9/11 was Osama bin Laden. He is a son of a billionaire tycoon from Saudi Arabia, kind of the different one in the family. They're all in construction, and he's into terrorism. But he belongs to a group in the 1980s, Osama bin Laden, called the Mujahideen. And the Mujahideen was a kind of fundamental religious Islamic group of freedom fighters that would go to Muslim countries and would fight against foreign occupiers. And in this incident, in the 1980s, Osama bin Laden, and he's not the leader of the Mujahideen, but he's up and coming, are going to Afghanistan. And Afghanistan is described as the Soviet Union's Vietnam. And I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but they had tried to basically control Afghanistan. They invaded Afghanistan, I believe, in 1980, and probably for the same reasons lots of countries do these types of things, kind of imperialistic, that they were looking for maybe oil supplies, or they wanted their footprint in the Middle East to spread communism, or whatever the reason was, they were there. And Mujahideen and nationalists from Afghanistan, just like in Vietnam, they didn't want foreigners. They didn't want somebody else telling them what to do. So the United States actually aided this group. We don't really care. Well, we do care, but it's not a deal breaker if your enemy's enemy doesn't align with you. So do we agree with the Mujahideen's theology? Some of the strict Mujahideen and the strict Islamic fundamental sects of the world, veil women and from head to toe. I'm not talking about headdress, but I'm talking about, a slit for their eye to see through. In Afghanistan, when the Taliban, there's more vocabulary, was controlling that country and allowing Osama bin Laden and what we're going to see form called Al-Qaeda to train in that country. But they executed women. They beheaded women in the soccer stadiums. These are hardcore religious fanatics, and women were not allowed to go to school, and eye for an eye, and total ban on music and dancing and Western civilization. So that is a different system, a very old system of totalitarianism and religious zealotry, and we haven't seen that in hundreds and hundreds of years in terms of controlling countries. But nevertheless, let's go back to the Cold War. So, let me check my time. So during the Cold War, the United States was supporting the Mujahideen, and the Soviet Union was fighting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. And eventually, through United States aid, there's actually a movie, I think it's called Charlie's War, maybe, where this congressman basically had this mission to help these guys fight the Soviets. And once we gave them rocket-propelled grenades, and they could shoot down the Soviet helicopters, the war really turned in the mid-'80s. And by the end of the 1980s, the Soviets were marching back to the Soviet Union, only to find that their country was going to fall apart in a couple of years. And that's one of the reasons. They invested a lot of money. There's a lot of nationalism invested in that war, and they lost. Just like, in a sense, we lost Vietnam, and we were defeated and deflated and, in debt. But we survived. They didn't. There's other reasons for that, but that you can definitely fit into that equation. So, after the Soviet Union left, basically the United States left too. We weren't going to really form a deep relationship with the Mujahideen. We have connections, and maybe some business connections and some oil connections with that group. But basically, Afghanistan kind of had a lot of civil war, had a lot of people jockeying for power. They have a lot of, I can't go into the politics of Afghanistan too much, but eventually the Taliban controlled Afghanistan, and I think they took over in 1999 or 2000, and they invited Osama bin Laden, or they allowed Osama bin Laden to basically set up training camps there. Remember, he's from Saudi Arabia. So why is he forming Al-Qaeda? Why is Osama bin Laden wanting to attack the United States? And, you've heard the phrase, they hate us for our freedom. And, I'm not arguing with that. I'm not saying they love us for our freedom. And they certainly don't want to set up a theocracy of Islamic fundamentalism that is free. But nevertheless, I think that's a more complex answer than they don't like us for our freedom. And I think part of it traces back to the Persian Gulf War. And nobody's laying blame. Nobody's going to ever say there's a reason why somebody should attack you on 9/11 or anything is justified. We're just looking for what's in your enemy's mind so you can understand how to react and how to be stronger or how to make different decisions or make the same ones, but nevertheless to be wiser for it. So I'm treading carefully because, I'm dealing with the death of 3,000 Americans and, basically a change in the paradigm and the system of politics in the United States, and people disagree. So, time check. And we got about 3.5 minutes, guys. So in 1991, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and we did that in the 1990s in the last lecture, and the United Nations was in and on, on it and everything. One of the places where we were allowed to basically set up camps and set up staging areas and train soldiers and do that kind of thing was Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, one of the largest country in the Middle East, I believe, and holder of the vast majority of oil resources, and our ally. They're not a democracy, they have a king, and women don't have rights in Saudi Arabia to vote or do things like, basic freedom stuff like we would take for granted. They were our ally. And they were our ally probably because they didn't want Saddam Hussein, this madman, this tyrant, this dictator, to get his hands on this oil. He was a threat to Saudi Arabia in a sense. I'm kind of going on a limb on that one. But nevertheless, part of the reason that Osama bin Laden hates America was because he's a very religious man. And I'm not excusing this, but he believes that that land is holy. And, I would imagine that him seeing GIs, drinking beer and eating bacon and peeing in the sands of Mecca, probably pissed him off. And at that point, some of the fundamental Islamic characters declared a fatwa, a jihad, against the United States because of that, view that they were coming, that they couldn't be here, so they had to have a holy war. And again, these are, barbaric things are going on in the Taliban, so it's not a big leap to think that they can think barbarically here. So Osama bin Laden is training in Afghanistan, and that's where the 9/11 attacks were planned. And on 9/11, 2001, 19 hijackers, I think 17 from Saudi Arabia, a couple from Yemen, did the deed. They flew those planes into, the Pentagon and the World Trade Center and crashed a plane into Pennsylvania, launching us into the Bush Doctrine. A minute and a half. George Bush is president, right? He didn't believe in a big foreign policy. But 9/11 to him, and this is where people disagree and get mad and argue, I'm just giving both sides. To him, he believed that this changed everything. And that because we were attacked like that, we had to attack before we were attacked the next time. It's called the Bush Doctrine, preemptive strike. And then we get into Iraq. Afghanistan, yeah, I understand the connection, but people on the left, Democrats, have a problem with the connection with Iraq. Saddam Hussein was not involved in 9/11. Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein is not a jihadist. He's not a fundamental Islam. He's not part of Al-Qaeda. But he was a tyrant. He was a dictator, absolutely. Though Democrats would say, there's lots of tyrants. We're not invading other countries. Why that one? So Bush went through a couple reasons. We're there for democracy. We're there to get rid of a tyrant. We're there because they're Al-Qaeda or there's Al-Qaeda's training and we can't have another 9/11. We're there for weapons of mass destruction. At the end of the day, other people have said, and I'll just put it out there, that we were there for a footprint. We were there to get our footprint in there, maybe not to steal the oil, but to have our hands in that business, to have our ability to influence that direction of that region. And it's called the American Enterprise Institute. And these folks on the right, conservatives, they're called neocons because they're new conservatives. They believe in that. And we'll leave it at that. Iraq didn't go well, the end.